Audiobooks for Everyone presents The Invisible Man, a Grotesque Romance by H. G. Wells. Full book summary. One wintry day, a mysterious stranger arrives in the quiet village of Iping, Sussex. Dressed in a long coat, thick gloves, and his face completely wrapped in bandages with dark goggles over his eyes, he checks into the coach and horses inn, requesting privacy and bringing with him a collection of strange scientific equipment. The villagers are both curious and suspicious, his appearance is unsettling, and his behavior secretive and volatile. The stranger is Griffin, a brilliant but cold-hearted scientist who has discovered how to make himself invisible. His experiments in optics and physics led him to a formula that changes the body's refractive index to match that of air, rendering it completely invisible. To test it, he used himself as the subject, succeeding in becoming invisible, but unable to reverse the process. Griffin initially believed invisibility would grant him freedom, power, and wealth. But he quickly discovers its drawbacks. He cannot eat without revealing his presence, as food remains visible until digested. He must go without clothes, which become visible if worn, leaving him vulnerable to weather and physical injury. Social interaction becomes impossible, people react with terror or aggression when they discover his nature. As Griffin attempts to continue his research and find a way to reverse the invisibility, he becomes increasingly frustrated and aggressive. He has no income and must steal to survive. When his landlady at the inn presses him for rent, he lashes out, revealing his invisibility during a violent outburst. Chaos ensues, and he flees the village, pursued by frightened locals. On the run, Griffin makes his way to the nearby town of Port Burdock. There, he seeks out an old acquaintance, Dr. Kemp, a former fellow student from medical school. Kemp is rational and curious, but soon becomes alarmed as Griffin tells him the full story of how he turned invisible and his plans for the future. Griffin, now fully unhinged, reveals a grand and disturbing ambition to use his invisibility to impose a reign of terror over society. He believes that with no one able to see or stop him, he can bend others to his will through fear and murder. Kemp, horrified by this madness, pretends to be sympathetic but secretly contacts the police. When Griffin realizes Kemp's betrayal, he becomes enraged. He writes a chilling note threatening Kemp's life and begins a spree of terror, attacking those who get in his way. He kills Mr. Wicksteed, an innocent man, and injures others in an attempt to exact revenge. A manhunt ensues. The townspeople, armed with clubs and pitchforks, band together to stop the invisible threat. Griffin, increasingly desperate, tired, and injured, is ultimately cornered in a barn. There, he is beaten by a crowd who can only track him by the disturbances he causes in his surroundings, footprints in mud, blood on snow, or displaced objects. As Griffin dies, his body gradually becomes visible again, pale, thin, and human. Only in death does he reappear, a grim symbol of the man he once was and the monster he became. Deeper themes and character insights. Griffin is both a tragic and terrifying figure. Once a promising young scientist, his obsession with power and his inability to connect emotionally with others isolate him further than invisibility ever could. His descent into violence is not simply caused by his invisibility, but by his lack of empathy, his narcissism, and his unchecked ambition. H. G. Wells crafts the story not just as a science fiction adventure, but as a dark reflection on the dangers of scientific overreach and social alienation. Griffin's invisibility symbolizes his detachment from humanity. He becomes literally and figuratively removed from society. The townspeople's reaction reflects both fear of the unknown and the power of collective action when threatened. Dr. Kemp serves as a contrast to Griffin, educated and scientific, yet grounded in morality. Where Griffin seeks domination, Kemp chooses reason and cooperation. Their interactions highlight the ethical responsibility that comes with scientific knowledge. Conclusion. The Invisible Man, a Grotesque Romance, is more than a tale of a man who becomes invisible. It is a psychological and moral study of what happens when science is used without conscience. Griffin's journey from genius to outcast to murderer is chilling, and his fate serves as a cautionary tale. Wells blends suspense, horror, and social commentary into a gripping narrative that remains relevant today, over a century after it was written. The story asks the reader, what would you become if no one could see you? For Griffin, the answer is monstrous. The end.